The council chamber stretched wide and tall, its walls shimmering with lights from 1,000 screens. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned sections, some breathing oxygen, others sitting in specialized environment pods. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, converting speech into languages that ranged from melodic whistles to complex chemical signals. Ambassador Jiwan stood at the human delegation's platform, her hands clasped behind her back. She wore the simple gray uniform that all human council workers wore. No medals, no decorations, just clean lines and practical fabric. Around her, the other ambassadors wore elaborate robes, glowing armor, or displayed their natural features like the crystalline Ashtar or the multi-limbed. Velcrin Counselor Vroxus of the Velcrin Dominion rose from his seat, his 6 arms spread wide in a gesture meant to command attention. His voice boomed through the chamber, translated instantly into every language present. We gather today to address a matter of efficiency and resource allocation. For 73 cycles, humanity has held membership in this council. In that time, they have contributed labor, maintenance services, and administrative support. However, we must ask ourselves, what unique value do they provide? Giwan kept her face neutral. She had seen this coming for months. The whispers in hallways, the exclusion from certain meetings, the way other species had begun treating human workers as invisible. Another counselor stood, one from the Ashtar Collective. Her crystalline body refracted light into rainbow patterns. Humanity possesses no advanced technology we cannot replicate. They have no exceptional physical capabilities, no telepathic abilities, no extended lifespans, no natural adaptations that benefit the Council. They are, in essence, unremarkable. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Jawan watched species who had never spoken to each other suddenly find common ground in their assessment of humanity. The Velcrin, who prided themselves on intellectual superiority, nodded along with the warlike Kresh, who valued only combat prowess. Even the peaceful Myra, floating in their water tanks, seemed to agree. They do menial work, someone called out. Work that any species could perform. They maintain our systems but offer no innovation, another added. Counselor Varaxis spoke again. I propose we revoke humanity's council membership. We can redistribute their duties among species who already contribute meaningfully to our civilization. All in favor? The vote happened quickly. Lights appeared on the main screen as each species cast their decision. Green for yes, red for no. The greens outnumbered the reds within seconds. 39 species voted to remove humanity. Only 8 voted to keep them. G1 felt something tighten in her chest, but she did not let it show on her face. She had prepared for this moment. They all had. Vraxis looked down at her from his elevated platform. Ambassador Juwan, humanity's membership is hereby revoked. Effective immediately. You have 2 standard weeks to remove all human personnel from council space. Do you have anything to say? Juwan stepped forward. The chamber fell silent. Many expected anger, perhaps tears, maybe a desperate plea for reconsideration. Instead, her voice came out calm and clear. Thank you, Counselor Vraxis, and thank you to all council members. Humanity appreciates the opportunity we were given to serve alongside you. We have learned much during our time here. We will comply with the removal order and will be gone within the requested time frame. We wish the council continued prosperity.
Oh.
That was it. No arguments, no emotional outburst, no demands for explanation. Guan bowed slightly, gathered her datapad, and walked toward the exit. The other 3 human delegates followed her in silence. The chamber erupted in conversation as soon as the humans left. Some counselors seemed satisfied, already discussing how to divide up the human work assignments. Others looked uncertain, as if they had expected more resistance. A few of the species who had voted against removal sat quietly, looking troubled. That was easier than expected, Vraxis said to the Ashtar counselor beside him. I thought they would at least argue their case. Humans are passive by nature, the Ashtar replied. They know their limitations. Better they leave quietly than make a scene. Outside the chamber, Jiwan walked through the crystal corridors of Unity Station with her delegates. None of them spoke until they reached the secure human quarters. Once inside, with privacy shields activated, the youngest delegate finally broke the silence. "Ambassador, what do we do now?" Guan set down her datapad and looked at each of them. "We do exactly what we planned. Send the message. Protocol 7. One of the delegates pulled up a communication terminal. His fingers moved quickly across the holographic keys, entering encryption codes that only humans knew. Within moments, a simple message went out across every human-operated system in Council space. It contained no explanations, no emotional appeals, just clear instructions. All human personnel are to prepare for immediate departure. Pack personal belongings only. Leave all stations and facilities in operational order. Transfer all access codes and operational documentation to designated Council replacements. Maintain professional conduct at all times. Departure begins in 48 hours. The message reached human workers on trade stations, agricultural worlds, research facilities, and frontier outposts. It reached engineers maintaining power grids, technicians managing communication networks, administrators coordinating supply chains, and mediators resolving disputes between species. It reached teachers in council schools, doctors in medical facilities, and the thousands of humans who performed the unglamorous work of keeping civilization running, and everywhere. Humans read the message and began to pack. On the Nexus Trade Hub, Chief Engineer Hunwo looked at the message on his screen. He sat in the main control room, surrounded by displays showing power distribution, life support, and traffic control for the massive station that served as a commerce hub for a third of council space. He had worked here for 12 years. He knew every system, every backup, every quirk and workaround. He stood up, stretched, and began writing his final report. In the agricultural sector, Mingi closed out her logistics programs. The screens before her showed food distribution networks, spanning 17 different species' dietary requirements across dozens of worlds. She had spent 8 years optimizing these routes, predicting shortages, and preventing supply chain breakdowns. She saved her work one last time and began the transfer protocols. On Frontier Station Epsilon 7, Security Chief Tai Yang looked at his team. 15 humans who had kept this border station safe from pirates, smugglers, and territorial disputes. They had done it so quietly that most of the station's inhabitants did not even know humans ran security. "Pack up," he said simply. "We leave in 2 days." Across council space, humans moved with purpose. No protests. No sabotage. No angry confrontations. They simply prepared to leave, professionally and thoroughly, just as they had done everything else. The council barely noticed. They were too busy congratulating themselves on their efficient decision-making and planning for their bright future without the burden of humanity's mediocrity. The Nexus Trade Hub floated in the darkness of space like a massive flower made of metal and light. 6 billion beings lived and worked within its rotating sections. Ships came and went every few seconds, carrying goods from 100 different worlds. The station had operated without major incident for 42 years. Hunwoo stood in the main engineering bay, watching his replacement arrive. The Velcrin engineer had 3 assistants with him, all carrying the latest scanning equipment. The Velcrin's name was difficult to pronounce, so everyone just called him Chief Torix. He walked with the confidence of someone who believed himself superior in every way. "Human Hunwoo," Torix said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I am here to assume control of engineering operations. I trust everything is in order." Hyunwoo nodded. "Yes, sir. All systems are currently operating at optimal levels. I have prepared complete documentation for you." He gestured to a data terminal where thousands of files waited. System specifications, maintenance schedules, emergency protocols, and operational notes from my 12 years here. Torix glanced at the terminal with barely concealed disinterest. "I have studied the basic station design. Velcrin engineering principles are far more advanced than human methods. I am certain I can improve efficiency within the first week." "Of course, sir," Hyunwoo said. He pulled up a specific file. "I want to draw your attention to the power distribution network. It uses an adaptive algorithm that adjusts to real-time demand fluctuations across all 6 sectors. The system learns from patterns and anticipates surges before they happen. Standard predictive modeling. Elementary stuff.
Yes, sir.
There are also several custom modifications I made to account for the specific harmonic frequencies generated by the Myra water processing units in Sector 4. They were causing feedback loops in the original design. Harmonic frequencies. Torx's tone made it clear, he thought. Hyunwoo was wasting his time. Human, I appreciate your attempt to be thorough, but I assure you, Velcrin engineers invented harmonic compensation theory 600 cycles ago. Hyunwoo paused, then nodded again. Understood, sir? All documentation is here if you need it. I have also left detailed notes in the system itself, with comments explaining the purpose of each modification. That will not be necessary. I prefer to implement my own methods. Torx turned to his assistants. Begin the systems audit. I want to know every inefficiency the human introduced. Hyunwoo watched them for a moment, then quietly gathered his personal belongings. A few photos, a coffee mug that had traveled with him from Earth, a small plant his daughter had given him. Everything else belonged to the station. He took one last look at the engineering bay where he had spent so many hours, then left without another word. Across the station, other humans were doing the same. In Medical Bay 7, Dr. Soman handed over patient records to her replacement. She tried to explain the specific treatment protocols she had developed for cross-species medicine. But the new doctor seemed more interested in reorganizing the supply cabinets in the education sector. Teacher Junho gave his classroom keys to the Ashtar who would take over. He had taught children from 15 different species to work together, communicate across cultural barriers, and understand each other's perspectives. The Ashtar asked no questions about his methods. They had their own curriculum to implement. On the commercial levels, human shop owners closed their businesses. Human restaurant workers served their last meals. Human janitors cleaned their sections one final time. Everywhere, humans left behind spaces that were cleaner, better organized, and more functional than when they had arrived. The departures happened in waves. Every 6 hours, transport ships arrived at designated docking bays to pick up human workers and their families. The ships were human-owned, operated by Earth's merchant fleet. They had been quietly positioned near council space for weeks. Waiting for the call, Minji stood in the Agricultural Administration Center, watching the Ashtar who would replace her. The being's crystalline form refracted light as it studied the logistics network displays. This seems overly complicated, the Ashtar said. Why are there 17 different distribution algorithms running simultaneously? Minji pulled up a chart. Each species has unique dietary requirements and storage needs. The Kresh need high-protein foods kept at cold temperatures. The Myra need aquatic plant life that spoils quickly. The Toral cannot consume anything that has touched certain metals. The system accounts for all of these factors, while optimizing transport routes and predicting demand based on population shifts, seasonal variations, and historical consumption patterns. The Ashtar made a sound that might have been dismissive. Yes, I can see the basic logic. This can be simplified significantly. Ashtar computational methods are far more elegant than these crude human approaches. There are also recursive dependencies built into the system, Minji continued. If one supply route fails, the algorithm automatically compensates by adjusting 7 other routes to prevent cascading shortages. And there are cascade protocols for emergency situations. Recursive dependencies. Cascade protocols. The Ashtar turned away from the displays. Human, you seem to believe your work here was complex. I assure you, managing resources is a simple matter of mathematics and logistics. The Ashtar have been doing this for thousands of years. Minji looked at the being for a long moment. She thought about explaining the hours she had spent learning the cultural nuances of food, preparation for different species, the time she had invested in building relationships with farmers, transporters, and distribution center managers, the way she had quietly resolved disputes before they became problems. But she could see it would not matter. I hope everything works well for you, she said instead. She transferred administrative access to the Ashtar's account and logged out of the system for the last time. On Epsilon, the frontier station that marked the edge of council space, Tai Yang gathered his security team for their final briefing. They stood in the operations room, surrounded by screens showing the space around the station. "Status check," Taeyang said. His second-in-command, Yoonji, pulled up a report. "All access codes transferred to the new security force. All weapon systems and defense protocols documented and handed over. Detention facilities are empty and clean. Our replacements arrived this morning. How are they?" Taeyang asked. Yoonji hesitated. "Confident. Very confident. The Kresh warriors believe the station has been underdefended because humans were in charge. They plan to implement more aggressive patrol patterns." Taeyang nodded slowly. "Did you show them the threat filtering system?" "I tried. They said they do not need software to identify enemies. They prefer direct engagement." Yoonji looked at her datapad. "I mentioned that we filter out approximately 90% of sensor contacts before they become actual threats. But they seem to think that was cowardice rather than efficiency." "Did you show them the communication relay protocols?" "Yes, they were not interested. They plan to use standard council military channels instead of our custom network." Taeyang walked to the main display and looked at the space beyond the station. Out there, in the dark, were smugglers, pirates, territorial raiders, and desperate refugees. He and his team had kept this station safe by being smart, not aggressive, by talking when possible and fighting only when necessary. By seeing patterns and preventing problems before they started, the new security force would learn soon enough. "Pack up your gear," he said to his team. "Our transport leaves in 4 hours." Within 2 standard weeks, every human had departed council space. 73 years of human presence ended quietly, efficiently, and completely. The last transport ships jumped to faster than light travel, carrying humans back toward Earth and its colonies. Behind them, the Council began its new era of prosperity. The species who had dismissed humanity as unremarkable now congratulated themselves on removing unnecessary members. They looked forward to a future where only the truly exceptional species shaped its galactic civilization. The silence from Earth and human colonies was complete. No messages, no diplomatic contact, no trade inquiries. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galactic stage. Most council members did not even notice. They were too busy celebrating their decision. For days after the last human transport left Nexus Trade Hub, Chief Torix sat in the engineering bay feeling annoyed. The power distribution system had stopped responding to his commands an hour ago. His Velcrin assistants stood around him, equally confused. "Run the diagnostic again," Torix ordered. The screens filled with data. Numbers scrolled past, but none of them made sense. The system showed full power generation, but distribution had dropped to 60% efficiency. Sectors 3 and 5 were experiencing brownouts. The environmental controls in the Myra habitat were failing. "The algorithm is not functioning correctly," one assistant said. Torix pulled up the core code. It was dense, layered, and full of modifications. Human modifications. He had dismissed Haiyan Wu's documentation as unnecessary. He was confident he could understand any system with his superior Velcrin intellect. Now, looking at the code, he realized it was far more complex than he had assumed. The algorithm was not just distributing power. It was predicting demand based on patterns Torix could not identify. It was compensating for variables he could not see. It adjusted itself constantly, learning from changes he did not understand. "Access the human's documentation," Torix said quietly. His assistant pulled up Haiyan Wu's files, thousands of pages of notes, explanations, and detailed comments. Torix began reading. Within minutes, he realized the problem. The system was not broken. It was adaptive. It had learned to work with Haiyan Wu's maintenance patterns. Without those patterns, it was trying to compensate for inputs that no longer existed. "Can we restore the original algorithm?" Torix asked. "No, sir." The human integrated his modifications into the core architecture. "We would need to rebuild the entire system from scratch." Torix felt something he rarely experienced: doubt. How long would that take? With full station power? 6 months. Without full power, we cannot run the necessary simulations. Then fix the current system. "Sir, we do not fully understand how it works." The lights flickered in the engineering bay. Somewhere deep in the station, backup systems began activating. They had 12 hours before the backups failed. After that, 6 billion beings would be without power. Torix reached for the communication panel. "Get me the Council emergency line. Tell them we have a critical situation on Nexus Hub." While Nexus Hub struggled with its power crisis, Epsilon 7 faced problems of its own. The new Kresh security force had been on duty for exactly 6 days when the first real pirate attack came. Commander Vorsk of the Kresh watched his sensors light up with contacts. 17 ships approaching from multiple vectors. Standard pirate formation. He smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Finally, real enemies. All units prepare for combat. We will show these raiders what happens when they attack a station protected by Kresh warriors. His tactical officer, also Kresh, growled in agreement. They launched their patrol ships and armed the station's defensive weapons. The approaching pirate fleet spread out, probing for weaknesses. Then the sensors went crazy. Contacts multiplied. What had been 17 ships became 70. Then 200. Then 500. The screens filled with targets, all approaching from different angles, all moving in patterns that seemed designed to overwhelm the defense systems. "What is happening?" Vorsk demanded. "Unknown, sir. Sensors show multiple hostile contacts, but many may be false readings or decoys. Then identify the real threats." "We cannot, sir. The sensor discrimination software is not working correctly." Vorsk felt his combat excitement turn to confusion. In Kresh warfare, you saw your enemy, and you fought them. This electronic chaos made no sense. "Where are our communication relays?" "Contact the Council Defense Fleet, sir. The relay network is down. We are using standard Council military channels, but there is significant interference." "From what?" "Unknown. The previous security team's custom communication network is offline. We deactivated it when we took over." The pirate ships, now apparently numbering in the thousands according to the sensors, began their attack run. Vorsk ordered his warriors to engage. The battle lasted 6 minutes. When it was over, Epsilon 7 had suffered significant damage. 3 patrol ships were destroyed, and the pirates had escaped with cargo from the commercial sector. Vorsk stood in the ruined operations room, trying to understand what had happened. His warriors had fought bravely, but they had been fighting ghosts and shadows while real enemies struck from unexpected angles. "Cite the human security team's files," he said. His voice low, his tactical officer accessed the archived records. They found detailed notes about sensor filtering, threat discrimination, and communication protocols. The humans had been identifying and filtering out false contacts automatically, something Vorsk had dismissed as cowardice. They had maintained a custom communication network that could cut through interference, something Vorsk had deactivated as unnecessary. The humans had not been weak. They had been smart, and Vorsk had been too arrogant to see the difference. The agricultural crisis revealed itself more slowly but with devastating effect. 3 days after Mingi left, the new Ashtar administrator noticed minor delays in food shipments. Nothing alarming, just small inefficiencies. By day 7, those delays had compounded. Fresh food was spoiling before it reached its destination. Shipments meant for herbivorous species were being sent to carnivores. Storage facilities were running out of space while other facilities sat empty. The Ashtar administrator, whose name translated roughly as efficient crystal, tried to optimize the system using standard Ashtar logistics models. The models worked perfectly in the simulations. In reality, they made things worse. Food riots broke out on 3 worlds by day 12. Not because there was no food, but because the food was in the wrong places. A farming world with surplus grain could not get it to a city world that needed it. A protein processing facility had too much inventory, while another facility, 3 systems. A way was empty. Efficient Crystal pulled up Minji's documentation, searching for answers. What it found was humbling. Miji had not been running a simple logistics program. She had been maintaining a living, breathing network that accounted for hundreds of variables. The Ashtar models did not include cultural food preferences, religious dietary restrictions, seasonal availability, spoilage rates for different species' digestive systems, political tensions between worlds that made direct trade difficult, personal relationships between farmers and distributors that affected willingness to cooperate, the social dynamics of 17 different species and their complex relationships with food. Minji had understood all of this. She had built it into her system, not as code, but as knowledge, insight, and experience. The Ashtar administrator was brilliant at mathematics and logistics theory, but it had no idea how to convince a Toral farmer to trust a Kresh distributor, or how to smooth over a misunderstanding between species who barely spoke the same language. The system began to fail in cascading waves. One broken supply route led to another, then another. The recursive dependencies and cascade protocols that Mingi had tried to explain kicked in, but without human oversight. They created new problems instead of solving them. On the 12th day, after the humans left, Counselor Varaxis received his first emergency report. By day 14, he had received 27 power failures on Nexus Hub, security breaches on multiple frontier stations, food distribution collapse, communication network disruptions, medical supply shortages, educational system breakdowns. Vraxis sat in his private chambers, reading through the reports with growing horror. Each one mentioned the same thing: human-designed systems failing, human-maintained networks falling apart, human workers who could not be replaced. He accessed the Council's records, searching for a full accounting of human contributions. The database search took 3 hours to complete. When it finished, Varaxis stared at the results in silence. Humans had not just maintained systems. They had created them, improved them, and held them together through constant attention and adaptation. They had mediated disputes between species who hated each other. They had bridged cultural gaps that other species did not even recognize. They had done 1,000 small tasks that kept civilization functioning. Tasks so invisible that nobody noticed them until they stopped being done. Vraxis thought about the vote. 39 species had agreed that humans contributed nothing unique. He had led that vote, confident in his assessment that humans were unremarkable. He had been catastrophically wrong. Vraxis reached for his communication terminal. He entered the code for Earth diplomatic channels. The message bounced back with an automated response. Humanity is no longer affiliated with the Galactic Council. Please direct all inquiries to member species representatives. He tried again. Same response. He tried emergency priority channels. Same response. The silence from Earth was absolute. Week 3, after the human departure, began with Nexus Trade Hub going completely dark for 17 hours. 6 billion beings sat in emergency lighting while Velcrin engineers desperately tried to restart systems. They did not fully understand. When power finally returned, it was at 40% capacity. Half the station had to be evacuated. The economic impact was immediate and brutal. Nexus Hub facilitated 30% of all Council trade. With the hub crippled, ships could not dock, goods could not be transferred. And trade routes that had functioned for decades simply stopped working. Merchants lost fortunes. Planets that depended on imported goods faced shortages. The Council economy, vast and complex, began to seize up like a machine without oil. Counselor Varaxis called an emergency session. The chamber that had been so confident 3 weeks ago now buzzed with panic and anger. Representatives shouted over each other, their translation devices struggling to keep up. My people are starving because food cannot reach them. The Myra representative cried, her voice bubbling through the water tank's communication system. My worlds have lost billions in trade revenue. A merchant prince from the Toral Consortium shouted, ships are stranded. Cargo is rotting in holds. This is a disaster. The Kresh War leader slammed a massive fist on his platform. 7 of our frontier stations have been raided. Pirates operate freely because we cannot maintain security without the human systems. This is unacceptable. Vraxis raised his hands, trying to restore order. Please, representatives. We are addressing each crisis as it develops. We have dispatched engineering teams to Nexus Hub. We have military forces reinforcing border security. We are working to restore the supply chains. Working? The Ashtar counselor's crystalline form flickered with agitation. It has been 3 weeks and conditions worsen daily. The humans built these systems. Only the humans can fix them. The humans were dismissed, Vraxis said, trying to sound authoritative. We voted to remove them. We cannot simply reverse that decision. Why not? Someone shouted from the back. Vraxis had no good answer. In the administrative levels beneath the council chamber, bureaucrats were discovering the full scope of the problem. It was not just infrastructure. Every aspect of council operations had human fingerprints on it. The translation protocols that allowed 83 different languages to be understood in real time had been maintained by human linguists. The protocols were breaking down, introducing errors and misunderstandings. What had once been smooth communication was becoming a nightmare of mistranslations and confusion. The medical databases that allowed cross-species treatment had been coordinated by human doctors who understood both the biological differences and the cultural attitudes toward medicine. Without them, doctors were misdiagnosing patients or recommending treatments that violated cultural taboos. Educational exchange programs that allowed young beings from different species to learn together had been organized by human teachers who knew how to bridge the gaps between wildly different learning styles and social structures. Those programs were collapsing into chaos as species defaulted to their own teaching methods and cultural assumptions. Even something as simple as scheduling became complicated. The council operated on a unified calendar system that accommodated the different day lengths, year cycles, and time perception of dozens of species. Humans had managed the constant adjustments needed to keep everyone synchronized. Without them, meetings were missed, deadlines confused, and coordination became nearly impossible. A young Velcrin analyst named Kashan spent 16 hours straight reviewing archived communications. He was trying to understand how humans had prevented conflicts between member species. What he found shocked him. The humans had been mediating dozens of disputes every single day. Most never reached the council level because humans resolved them quietly through conversation, compromise, and creative problem-solving. They had prevented trade wars, territorial disputes, cultural offenses, and misunderstandings before they could escalate. Caution pulled up the current dispute log. In 3 weeks without human mediators, unresolved conflicts had increased by 400%. Species who had learned to work together under human guidance were now defaulting to old grudges and suspicions. The Velcrin and Ashtar, who had united to vote humans out, were now barely speaking to each other over a trade disagreement. The Kresh and Toral, historical enemies, had military ships facing off across a contested border. The council was not just losing infrastructure. It was losing cohesion. Caution took his findings to Counselor Vraxis. The older Velcrin read through the report in his private office, his multiple arms trembling slightly. This cannot be correct, Vraxis said. You are suggesting that humans were essential to maintaining peace between member species? Not suggesting, Counselor. Proving. Look at the data. Human mediators resolved an average of 73 disputes per day. Since their departure, we have resolved only 12. The rest are escalating. Araxis set down the data pad. We are advanced species. We do not need humans to tell us how to behave. With respect, Counselor, we apparently do. Or we did. The humans were not telling us how to behave. They were helping us understand each other. There is a difference. Vraxis was silent for a long moment. What else have you found? Caution pulled up more files. The humans were maintaining networks we did not even know existed. Informal communication channels between workers of different species. Cultural exchange programs that operated below official notice. Research collaborations that crossed species lines. They built connections, Counselor. They made the Council into something more than just a political arrangement. They made it real. And now those connections are breaking. We are becoming what we were before humans joined, a collection of separate species who tolerate each other for economic benefit, but do not actually cooperate. Vraxis closed his eyes. The weight of his mistake pressed down on him like physical force. He had dismissed humanity as unremarkable, because they had no spectacular abilities, no impressive technology, no dramatic presence. He had failed to see that their value lay in exactly the opposite, in their ability to work with anyone, adapt to any situation, and find common ground between beings who had nothing in common. He had measured worth by spectacle rather than substance. It was a fool's error, and he had led 46 other species into making it with him. "Try contacting Earth again," Vraxis said. "Use every channel we have." Kasha nodded and left. Vraxis sat alone in his office, surrounded by reports of failing systems and escalating crises. He thought about the vote 3 weeks ago. How confident they had all been. How certain that removing humans would improve efficiency and prosperity. His communication terminal chimed. Koshin's face appeared on the screen. "Counselor, all channels to Earth return the same automated message. Humanity is not responding to any communication attempts. It is as if they have completely severed all ties with us. Keep trying. Send diplomatic envoys to Earth if you must. We need the humans back, sir. Even if they agree to return, how long will it take to repair the damage? Weeks? Months? Some of these systems may be beyond recovery." Vraxis had no answer. The cascade of failures was accelerating. Each broken system led to other failures. The interdependencies that humans had managed so carefully were now working in reverse. Dragging the entire council toward collapse, reports continued to flood in. Riots on multiple worlds. Trade ships stranded. Medical emergencies becoming fatal because the right equipment was not available. Species withdrawing from council space to protect their own interests. The grand civilization that had taken thousands of years to build was unraveling in weeks, and through it all, the silence from Earth remained absolute. Vraxis finally understood what the humans had been. They were not the spectacular species with amazing abilities. They were the ordinary species who did the necessary work. They were the ones who noticed what others overlooked, who cared about details that seemed unimportant, who understood that civilization was not built on grand achievements, but on a million small acts of maintenance, cooperation, and care. They had been the glue holding everything together, and the council had thrown them away. 6 weeks after humanity's departure, Counselor Vraxis stood before the full council assembly and admitted defeat. The chamber was less crowded than before. Several species had withdrawn their representatives to deal with crises on their home worlds. Those who remained looked exhausted and angry. "The situation is unsustainable," Vraxis said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "We have lost operational control of 40% of our infrastructure. Trade has declined by 65%. Conflicts between member species have tripled. We are facing food shortages, power failures, and security breaches across council space. If we do not act immediately, the council will collapse entirely within 2 months." The chamber was silent. No one argued. They had all seen the reports. "I propose we formally invite humanity to return to the council," Vraxis continued. "Not as junior members performing menial tasks, but as full partners with seats on the ruling body. We will offer territorial concessions, financial compensation, and whatever else they require. We need them back." The vote was unanimous. All 47 species agreed. There was no debate, no discussion, just desperate agreement. Vraxis personally recorded the message to Earth. He spent 3 hours writing it, trying to find words that could somehow convey both apology and urgency without sounding pathetic. In the end, he settled for honesty. The message explained the crisis in detail. It acknowledged the Council's mistake in dismissing humanity. It offered everything the Council could offer: power, wealth, territory, respect. It begged, as diplomatically as possible, for humans to return before everything fell apart. The message was sent on every available channel: diplomatic frequencies, emergency bands, even commercial communication networks. The Council waited for a response. 2 days later, Ambassador Jiwan accepted the communication request. Every council member attended. Even those who had withdrawn their representatives returned for this. The main screen in the chamber activated, showing Jiwan sitting in what appeared to be a comfortable office on Earth. She looked the same as she had 6 weeks ago, calm, professional, unremarkable. Vraxis stood to address her, his prepared speech ready. But before he could speak, Jiwan raised her hand gently. Counselor Vraxis, I have read your message and discussed it with Earth's government. Before you continue, I need you to understand something. She gestured, and the view expanded. Around her sat representatives from other species. Vraxis recognized some of them, species who had been exploited by council members, minor civilizations who had been ignored or dismissed, refugees who had been turned away. There were 15 different species present, none of them council members. Over the past 73 years, Juan said, while we worked for the council, we were also building something else. We studied your technologies and learned from your mistakes. We established relationships with species you overlooked. We created trade networks that did not depend on council infrastructure. We prepared for the possibility that the council would eventually decide we were not valuable enough to keep. Vraxis felt something cold settle in his chest. This was not desperation. This was preparation. See, counselor, we understood something about ourselves that you never did. Humanity is adaptable, we learn. We build relationships. We work with anyone, anywhere, under any conditions. These are not spectacular abilities. They are not the kind of things that impress council members who value only the exceptional, but they are powerful in their own way. Giwan leaned forward slightly. While we maintained your power grids and managed your logistics, we were also teaching other species how to work together. We were sharing knowledge with civilizations you ignored. We were building a network based on cooperation and mutual respect, not hierarchy and exploitation. Another screen appeared behind Juan, showing a star map. Varaxis recognized it as the region beyond council space. But it was filled with new trade routes, alliance markers, and shared infrastructure. The humans had built their own network out there in the dark, where the council never looked. You dismissed us as unremarkable, Juan continued. And by your standards, we were. We had no natural telepathy, no superior strength, no exotic biology, just the ability to adapt, persist, and work with others. You thought those qualities were common and worthless? We knew they were rare and valuable. The Ashtar counselor spoke up, her voice edged with desperation. Ambassador Giwan, we acknowledge our mistake. We are offering you everything we can offer. Power, wealth, territory. Please, we need your help. Guan looked at the Ashtar with something that might have been pity. You need our help now, but 6 weeks ago, you needed us just as much and did not even know it. You needed us when we maintained the systems that kept you alive. You needed us when we mediated your conflicts and bridged your cultural gaps. You needed us when we did the thousands of unglamorous tasks that made your civilization function. But you could not see that need because we did our work quietly and without drama. We see it now, Raxa said. Please, Ambassador. Millions of beings are suffering because of our arrogance. Whatever we did to offend you, whatever price you want us to pay, we will pay it. Just help us. Chuan was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. Counselor, you are still not understanding. This is not about offense or payment or punishment. This is about us moving forward. For 73 years, we worked for a council that saw us as servants. We learned everything we needed to learn from that experience. Now we are building something new with partners who value cooperation over hierarchy. She gestured to the species representatives around her. These beings understand what you could not, that every role matters, that quiet competence is worth more than loud brilliance. That civilization is built by people who care about the unglamorous work of keeping things running, not by people who only care about spectacular achievements. Then we will change, Raxus said, hearing the desperation in his own voice. We will restructure the council. We will value the work you do. We will make you full partners in everything. You will try, Yuan said. And perhaps you will even succeed for a while. But eventually, the old patterns will return. The species with spectacular abilities will dominate. The quiet workers will be taken for granted. It is the nature of the system you built. We do not want to reform that system, Counselor. We want to build a better one. The Myra representative spoke, her voice bubbling through the translation system. But what about all of us who depended on you? Who trusted you? Are we to be punished for the Council's decision? Guan's expression softened. You are not being punished. You are experiencing the natural consequences of taking essential workers for granted. We did not sabotage your systems. We did not withhold critical information. We left everything in perfect working order and provided complete documentation. The failures you are experiencing are not our fault. They are yours. For failing to understand the value of what you had, she paused, then added, if individual species wish to establish relationships with humanity on terms of mutual respect and genuine partnership, we are open to those conversations. Several council species have already reached out to us separately. We are negotiating with them as equals, not as employers and servants. Braxis saw his last hope slipping away. What can we do to change your mind? Nothing, Counselor. This is not about changing minds. This is about accepting reality. The Council dismissed us because we were unremarkable. You were right by your own standards. We are unremarkable. We have no fantastic abilities, no superior technology, no dramatic presence. We just work hard, adapt to any situation, and help others succeed. You thought those qualities were worthless. We knew they were exactly what we needed to build our own future. Guan stood up, and the other species representatives stood with her. We wish you well, Counselor Vraxis, and all members of the Council. We hope you manage to solve your problems. But we will not be returning to solve them for you. We are done waiting for others to recognize our value. We are building our own civilization now, with partners who understood from the beginning what you could not learn in 73 years. She looked directly at the camera, and Vraxis saw something in her eyes that made him understand the full scope of his mistake. It was not anger or resentment. It was confidence. The confidence of someone who had been underestimated their entire life and had used that underestimation to prepare for exactly this moment. You taught us an important lesson, Yuan said. You taught us that the most valuable abilities are the ones that go unnoticed until they are gone. Thank you for that lesson, Counselor. We will not forget it. The transmission ended. The council chamber sat in stunned silence. Around Vraxis, the representatives of 47 species stared at the empty screen, finally understanding what they had lost, not just workers, not just technicians or administrators or mediators. They had lost the foundation of their civilization. They had lost the beings who cared about making things work, who noticed problems before they became crises, who built connections between species who had nothing in common. They had lost the ordinary people who made extraordinary things possible, and they had lost them because they had measured worth by spectacle rather than substance, by drama rather than dependability, by impressive abilities rather than essential work.